10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Liftoff and the clock is starting. Liftoff.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And as we bounce along in the lower gravity, it's time now for Kerbalcast, episode 46, having fun on the Mun.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May.
Come on, sing it, Nos. I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, and with us today, back in the Command Module Pilot seat, our CMP,
Tromo.
Coming up in today's program, Mud-doggin, or should that be Mun-doggin, and it's as easy as ABZ access. We'll talk about our progress in the game.
Maxmaps gives us a sneak peek on 1.0. We'll have highlights from Squadcast.
And we'll read your letters and news in this week's mission briefing featuring another audio letter from Andy M.
And Freetoss is back with another installment of Flight Fundamentals.
And I would strongly recommend that you listen to Flight Fundamentals.
I'll find some.
It works. It works. I'm serious. The last one he did, I sat down with a piece of paper and I made notes of everything he said because he clearly tells you which parts that you need to use. Mm-hmm. I actually built and launched and flew a plane.
Did you land it?
No.
Oh, let's not get into that, though. But everything else went well. Everything else went well.
Hey, that's further than I've...
Yeah.
I mean, usually when I build a plane, usually there's about 30 reverts to vehicle assembly.
Yeah. Before
I even get the stupid thing off the ground. And then usually it flies like a wounded duck. Mm-hmm. He actually, using his teachings, I was actually able to very quickly build a workable, flyable, controllable plane.
Yeah.
One thing I have noticed, though, about people who enjoy planes and space planes in KSP, they all say the same thing.
What's that?
Planes aren't hard. Have you noticed that? Every single... It's like, I'm doing it. Freetoss challenged me to follow along and to use his teachings and to learn how to do planes, and I told him I would, and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I hate planes. Okay, I'm sorry. I hate planes.
Yeah.
I hate them now more than when I started. But I'm finally able to build them and fly them because of what because he's specific. He will tell you which parts you need. I mean, he will tell you exactly step by step how to build a plane.
I just imagine you building the thing and like you're building it accurately, but it's just fueled by hate. You're like, oh, and this is going to work so great, but I hate it so much.
It's a Sith plane.
Yeah.
You know what? The wings, they're red lightsaber,
Oh, yeah.
That's what all the wings and... and all the
after the Force Unleashed lightsaber, I think anything's possible.
They came out with the Force Unleashed or Force Awakens. Force
Unleashed
I
said Force Unleashed. Yeah, that was the game. Yeah, sorry.
They
Force
came
Awakens.
out with the Force Awakens second trailer.
Yeah,
and I think for about an hour I just sat there and it was like play, replay, replay, replay. My girlfriend came walking in and I was like, "Honey, look at this," and she was.
Yeah, I've been hearing it for the past hour. So I originally thought that the little droid guy, like he was just on a soccer ball and he was cruising around, but no, that's like he's on it. Yeah, like that is a part of him. Yeah, and I think that's real interesting, and I really want to see what he does. Yeah, and it opens up a ton of toy RC car possibilities.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
There you go. And I'm wondering if they're going to get that guy an inhaler because like. He's in the Stormtrooper outfit, and he's like...
yeah. Every time you see him, he's out of breath. Yeah. That's his default position. He's always running.
Yeah.
I hope that the droids in the new Star Wars movie, and this is not a dig on Interstellar, because, that was like my favorite movie of 2014. But I do hope the droids visually make more sense than the robots in Interstellar. Yeah. I never really bought the robots in Interstellar.
Yeah, like why would they make it look like that?
Yeah.
It was cool, and it always did cool stuff, but didn't make the most sense.
It didn't look like something that would happen in the real world.
Yeah, like no
without
one would
like a
design
puppeteer standing behind them or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, I want to welcome you back. It's honestly, last week you told me weeks ago.
Yeah.
That you were going to be out last week, and I forgot.
Yeah, my girlfriend's birthday, so we went back to her hometown.
And happy birthday to your girlfriend.
Yeah. So
I totally forgot. I was ready to. I had all the letters were printed out. I literally had everything.
Yeah, he sent me
ready
a text.
to go.
He sent me a text like, "You ready? When are you going to be ready to podcast?" And I said, "Next week."
I was like, "What? Oh, the birthday thing."
Yeah, because I was already like 100 miles away. So.
Well, I've resolved I need to stop going to sleep, because what happens is when I wake up the next morning, I always sit bolt upright with these, I've got an idea. I always have these eureka moments.
Yeah.
Because I had not anticipated that you were going to be gone last week. I did not have time to set up a co-host. So I figured, well, we're just going to have to skip, as much as I hate to do that. Well, on the day that we would have normally released an episode, I woke up that morning, I sat bolt upright in bed, and I went, a special episode hosted by Amy, a Kerbal Life.
Yeah.
I'll do that. And so, I contacted Amy, and I laid out two options for her. I really wanted her to do option number 2. But not to terrify her, I laid out option number 1, which was easier.
Yeah.
I said, Amy, would you do like a short introduction? I'll run all 10 Kerbal Lives back to back, and then you can do a short close. Or you can do a behind the scenes intro to each one. And she said, I'd rather do that. And I was like, that's what what I wanted.
It was cool.
Oh, she did great.
Yeah.
She did. I even knew the backstory of a lot of it. When I was putting the thing together, I was fascinated.
Yeah.
And she was saying things that I already knew, but I was still fascinated.
Yeah, it was fun. It was like going to the special, special feature section of the Kerbalcast, menu.
One thing that did surprise me, I didn't realize how close she and I were in our opinions on some things. She mentioned that episode 3 was her least favorite of the Kerbal Life.
Yeah, I heard that, and it made me weary, because I was like, is it because of the donut cart? Because that was the voice. That was the voice for the donut cart.
That was you.
Yeah.
No,
I closed my nose for that voice.
What got me though was that was my least favorite one.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, I even said to you at the time, when we did that one, I think I even said to you, I'm getting a little weary of this joke of the week stuff. It's just this one's not working.
Yeah, and it really took off from there.
Yeah, part of the reason that one had things in there like the donut card and stuff like that was it wasn't working. And when I was doing production on it, I kept trying to add things and I kept trying to tweak things to make it work, and I could never quite get it where I thought it was working. I mean, it worked in the sense that it kind of finished that little story arc, but the episode itself did not work, I thought.
Yeah.
And also there was another thing, and Amy didn't mention this, but she did ding me about it later, was she and I had this kind of back and forth about, there's the joke, are Kerbals plants? Well, I had said, she should put a line in there where MC says, ever since I was a little sprout, and then Carmen would say, does that mean that Kerbals are plants?
Yeah.
Well, she didn't like that, so she didn't put it in the script. Well, I added it.
Yeah. And
then she took it out, and then I put it back in. And so when it aired, she was like, it was like, and so, that was part of the reason she didn't like it was, she kind of felt like, we need to be subtle here. We don't need to go get a 2x4 and hit people over the head with it. But she's right. We did have a sit down after episode 3, and that's kind of when I got a better sense of where she was going.
Yeah. The other thing that was like, we started to notice, especially early on, there were big differences between, we're from different countries.
Yeah.
And we had different styles of humor.
Right.
If you look at a British comedy versus an American comedy, they're different,
Well, one thing she didn't mention, but I definitely want to point out here, she said the first 3 episodes were heavily edited. I did a lot of editing on those. And then starting with episode 4, really, pretty much what you hear with some minor tweaks. I mean, and we're talking minuscule.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like she might have put a comma and I might have replaced it with a, you know, ellipsis or something. Beginning with episode 4 of A Kerbal Life, what you hear is pretty much word for word what Amy scripted.
Yeah.
Part of that is, yes, we were more on the same page from that point on, but there's another thing which she didn't mention, and I really want to tip my hat to Amy here. She, within the space of 4 scripts, became a very efficient, very economical writer.
Yeah. Yeah, very much. Like, we read this like, oh, this is compact, and this is, you know.
Well, I mean, her progress from one script to the next was astounding. Because, you know, the scripts were getting shorter and shorter. She was focusing, I mean, the story was clearly moving from point A to point B. She was only bringing in characters if they were necessary. The dialogue became more load-bearing. I mean, there wasn't, there wasn't a throwaway. It got to the point where there literally wasn't a throwaway line.
Yeah.
Everything that needed to be in there was in there. And it was well written. It was well scripted. It was funny. That's another reason why, beginning really with episode 4, it became her script. It's because within 3 short scripts and then the 4th, she improved so much. I don't mean improved because that makes it sound like, you know,
it was somewhere bad to begin with.
Yeah,
but
she was great to begin with, but I mean, she got even better.
Yeah.
She just, within a very short period of time, she figured out, oh, this is audio, and, you know, this is how I move the story forward. This is how I focus on a character. And I mean, you know, she just, Amy is such an incredibly talented person. She's a good writer. She's funny to listen to. Yeah. She's fascinating. She's intelligent. I just, you know, I cannot praise her enough. And I think kind of one of those circle of life, little irony type things. Do you remember how we were introduced? Do you remember the chain of events that led to us even knowing Amy in the first place? Do you remember this?
No, actually. Sorry, Amy.
I was watching Twitch.
Yeah.
And I was watching guys play KSP. And I happened to stumble across, there was this woman who was playing KSP, and I noticed that the chat window. The guys that were playing.
That was early on.
Yeah. The guys that were playing KSP, all the chat was focused on KSP.
Yeah.
When the girl was playing it, there was always somebody going, hey, your hair's pretty. You're pretty. You know, tell us about yourself. You know, they were all flirty and whatever. And I know I caught you off guard, and I kind of caught myself off guard because until I started saying it, I didn't realize I was going to say it.
Yeah.
But it was that week's Kerbalcast, and I started talking about how I thought it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
That there was this distinction between gamers and girl gamers. We're gamers.
Yeah.
We're not boy gamers and girl gamers. We're gamers.
Yeah.
And I thought it was ridiculous that she was on Twitch and people were talking about her being a girl as opposed to the game she was playing. And you immediately rolled with it. I know I surprised you, but you immediately said, well, for example, look at an Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., people ask him about, hey, what's it like to be Iron Man? Tell us about Tony Stark. With Scarlett Johansson, it's what diet do you have to be on to get in the cat suit? So you immediately pointed out, hey, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it any better. Well, we released the episode. Amy wrote us a letter saying, thank you so much for pointing that out, and then talking about some of the stuff she's had to put up with. And that's how we got to know Amy. And then, of course, A Kerbal Life came along and the whole bit. And then Amy ended up co-hosting. But that's how we got to know Amy. What I find hilarious is about a month ago, Amy started Twitch streaming.
Yeah.
So the whole reason we know Amy in the first place has come full circle. Now Amy is Twitch streaming.
Which is
what started the whole thing.
You know, I think we should get a bunch of people next time, like DK streams. We should all start complimenting his hair. You know, DK, your hair looks great.
Hey, I should start.
It does. He's got great hair.
You know, I should start streaming so that people can go, he has no hair. Because remember, I look like Walter White.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give Amy a real quick plug here.
Okay.
You can be sure and subscribe to her on Twitch. It's Aomi83, AOUMI83, which she has assured me is not a funny spelling of Amy.
Yeah.
It means deep blue ocean in Japanese. She actually lived in Japan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, got a little lost in translation thing going there. Minus the Bill Murray. But anyway, strong praise for Amy. I thought she did an awesome job hosting episode 45. It was really neat to listen to the backstory of a Kerbal life. Although I'm surprised she didn't know who Slim Pickens was. Mm-hmm. How can you not have seen Dr. Strangelove?
Yeah.
I will say, you know how I said that I base MC on Slim Pickens? Mm-hmm. I didn't realize this until last episode. I actually don't base him on Slim Pickens. I base him on Major Kong.
Oh, okay.
I base him specifically on that character from Dr. Strangelove because it's that, you know, in the face of Armageddon, for all he knows, the world is ending. And he's got this kind of can-do, goofy optimism. You know, this, we're going to get us some promotions when all this is over with. It's like the world ended and you're worried about promotions.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the character. Another thing I would say, you and I, our age difference has never really been an issue. You and I I just turned 52. Yeah. You're
27.
27.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have never had a old guy, young guy relationship. I mean, we never talked to each other like that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I don't, you don't come over and yes, young grasshopper.
And I don't come over like, hey, you need your pills?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey,
I'm over here. You ready to do Kerbalcast?
I got you some Depends, Grandpa.
Yeah.
But when we first started A Kerbal Life, do you remember the very first time we sat down to record? I did Jeb and you did MC. Yeah. And you remember it wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know if it was my idea or your idea, but then we flipped.
Yeah.
And boom, it immediately started working. And we didn't realize it until later, but yeah, the older guy needs to be MC.
Yeah. Yeah. The old and the young naive Jeb.
Yeah.
This is best played by young naive Nas.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's one of the few instances where our age difference actually kind of worked. And also, I hearkened back, when I was trying to do character prototypes, I hearkened back to older stuff. Mm-hmm. Walter Cronkite, Slim Pickens. You hearkened back to The Signal.
Yeah.
The movie The Signal, not the podcast.
Yeah.
Again, there's that kind of that age difference. But it normally does not.
It normally doesn't come up.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I want to get into now that we're done praising Amy. I want to get into Squadcast this week. Maxmaps gave us a preview of update 1.0, and he showed us some really neat features. And I went through. I managed to catch about the second half of it, and I pulled some quotes from it. And some of the new features, we've talked about that they're going to do enhanced physics in the game. That includes their version of deadly re-entry. So, do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, first part is deadly re-entry is going to come with it, and you can turn it on and off.
Re-entry heat is obviously an option. You can just get rid of it, have no more heat, nothing to worry about. But for people who want to play with re-entry heat, there should be things that you have to change in their signs. Yeah, your fairings will protect stuff on the way up, but, fairings have to kind of go away and all that. So that's not, fairings can solve some stuff, but fairings cannot solve all stuff.
And that's where something else comes into as well. I won't say for the first time because they've had things in there that are similar to this, but they are now going to put an emphasis on cargo bays. Things that you can actually put stuff inside to protect.
These utility bays are not only excellent at protecting stuff from heat, they are decently aerodynamically safe. Like they won't add too much drag, and they will protect absolutely anything you put into them. they have just about enough space that in case that you are, kinda absolutely nuts, you can cram Kerbals into that, but that wouldn't be like the nicest thing to do in the world. They have the transparency thing that we added to the fairing, so you can see into them and you can explore them and all that. You can just put all your scientific stuff in there and make sure it stays, absolutely safe.
I have a question. Has Maxmaps actually played Kerbal? Because, he's talking about how it's not nice to do certain things to Kerbals. It's like, I thought that was part of the game.
It's the whole premise of the game.
It was like, what's the most evil, wicked thing you can do to these poor guys?
Yeah.
And apparently jamming them in a cargo bag. We're talking about re-entry in 1.0. We're talking about protecting things with fairings. Well, there's another piece of that as well, because if you've got deadly re-entry, what else do you need?
Big ol' heat shields.
We are adding a heat shield system that should make all your landings far, far safer as long as you use them.
As long as you use them. I have to give him credit for that one. Another feature which is being added to the game is resource gathering. And Maxmaps showed a picture of it. And this was his description of it.
What you have there is a claw grabbing quite tightly to an asteroid. You have 2 drills digging into the asteroid, draining it of ore, the ore is going through the converter in the middle and being stocked into the storage tanks at the back. The converter crunches that down into whatever propellant you have set the converter to pull out of the ore, and then you can use that to fuel just about anything you want.
Now, gathering resources out of an asteroid, that's new to the game.
Yeah, and so the question asks, how much can you get from that?
Do asteroids have a limited amount of ore? Yes, they do. They do have massive amounts, though. Like, the larger one, if you catch a Class E, big chance that you are set for life. Like, if you manage something like that, it's such a massive amount of fuel that you will be good to go for quite a while. If you class a catch A, it'll be great for a couple missions. Obviously, there's not just fuel in asteroids, there's also fuel on planets. This is a base, the start of a base, digging in Duna, grabbing a bunch of ore, and setting itself up for refueling. The drills take a decent amount of power consumption, not a huge amount, but you have to plan around a way to keep them energized.
What I like about resource gathering is it is not that the technology doesn't exist today, but it's not being utilized in the space program like we think of it.
Yeah.
And so what I like about this stuff is Kerbal is now starting to lap actual real-world space programs. The last thing that he talked about, he said that 1.0 is going to feature a bigger physics bubble. I have a question about that, but let me run his quote real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
We are upping the physics bubble to 27.5 kilometers, which is over 10 times what it currently is. So collisions are far more likely to happen now.
Okay, here's my question. Physics bubble. If I understand it the way I think I understand it, is he talking about the space around an individual player in multiplayer?
Yeah, so my big question is, what is it? But if I had any guesses, I think that whatever thing is currently active in the game has a certain area of physics around it and makes it more likely to have more concrete interactions with things.
Yeah.
So if the physics bubble's larger, if you were to pass a piece of debris, it's more likely to be within the physics bubble and cause it to happen.
Right.
I'm talking out of my flight suit right now.
Out of the back end of your flight suit?
Out of the back seat of my flight suit. I have no idea.
I think that's what he's talking about, but I'm not 100% sure.
I think it's going to add bubbles to the game, and those bubbles will have physics, and there may be a planet made of bubbles.
That's true.
And it'll be like Sonic the Hedgehog when you're underwater and you go to the bubble to get your air.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Will the bubble planet be next door to the cookie planet?
I wonder what day they're on Cookie Planet now.
Yeah.
If they're still alive.
Did they ever get the milk shipment that they needed?
Because the last one was
Boy,
Chocolate.
we're doing such a callback. Such a callback. And you know what's funny? That was never part of the episode
No,
proper.
it was the outtakes.
It was
'Cause,
in the outtakes.
Like anytime we had like a pause between us doing stuff, I would start talking about Cookie Planet.
Yeah.
I couldn't let it go. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I wish people could hear the setup to what we do.
Yeah.
Because when we were, before we started recording, I showed you all the pictures that Maxmaps had posted. And I played all the quotes so that you would, be up to speed on what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And you immediately went into this car commercial voice. Can you do it? Do the car commercial voice.
Come on down to 1.0. We got dead reentry with 2 features, on and off. We got cargo bays, big old heat shields. We got resource gathering. How much can you gather? You come, you can haul it off. KSP 1.0 features a physics bubble. You'll find that out when you sign up.
Yeah, I mean,
Come on down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting over trying to get stuff ready, and you're doing that. What happened? It was like this rabid cat just got loose, and you're like,
Well, we had the highlight reel, and it seriously looked like we were featuring like things in a car lot.
Well, we did.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so funny. But Cookie Planet is a callback. You know what else is a callback? Somebody actually brought this up. I teased when Amy said that she was going to do the Kerbal Life episode. I teased that we were going to do a very special episode, and somebody said, "Yeah, I bet it's featuring that one listener in American Samoa." I was like, "Oh my!" I mean, I think that was like episode 3.
Yeah, it was. No, you know what it was?
What?
I think that was episode 6.
No,
I seriously think it was.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was.
Somebody asked me
Check
about
and see
that.
if that person was Canadian. But
I was on Steam the other day, and somebody asked me. They said, "Do you still have the one listener in American Samoa?" And so I went on Libsyn, because Libsyn breaks it down geographically.
yeah, we can see where your house is.
It's
We can't actually do that.
It's not. I need to clarify. We don't have one listener in American Samoa. We have one download.
Yeah, like one
to
guy.
this day, we still have one download.
Yeah, one guy went to American Samoa. Was like, I want to listen to Kerbalcast, and let's do it.
I think there's 3 things that could have happened there.
Yeah.
Either A, one of our regular listeners went to American Samoa and happened to download an episode while they were there. B, and probably far more likely, somebody in American Samoa downloaded the episode and hated it.
Yeah.
And never downloaded it again.
That's probably it.
And told all his friends, so nobody else has ever downloaded us.
Yeah.
Or C, he downloaded it and people heard him and then beat him up.
Yeah.
And so he's never downloaded it since.
He got sent away.
But yeah, we literally have one download. To this day, we have one download in American Samoa. Not one listener, one download.
When the second one shows up, I'm going to freak out. Because that means that guy was like, oh, yeah, I should have listened to that Kerbalcast again. Or one of our listeners flew out there just to download it and then fly back.
One of our regular listeners goes to American Samoa every year on vacation. And, they can't be without their Kerbalcast.
Yeah, it's got to relax.
So they have to download it.
We're coming up on 1 year, so maybe we'll get close to...
Yeah, that's true. We really are.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
What do you think of 1.0 from what we've seen?
I think the neat thing about resource gathering, that's the thing I'm most excited about.
Yeah, me too.
It gives me a reason to go to the Mun again besides contracts. Like, it gives me a reason to want to go. It gives me a reason to want to go to certain... biomes and go to different parts of the Mun instead of, okay, I landed on indiscriminate part of the Mun 0.4.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and plant my flag, get my money, and let's get out of here. It's like somebody who's completely unappreciative stopping by like a wonder of the world, walk by, take the photo, put it on social media.
Hey, what you got to eat?
Yeah. Where's the concession stand?
Well, what I like about resource gathering is it is another step closer to making you feel like you live in the game.
Yeah, because it's like you need resources, and you need to go collect things.
The fact that you can go and collect things. I have talked many times about the X series games and how I had been just absolutely obsessed with them for a couple of months. That's part of what you can do in that game is you can scan asteroids for ore.
Yeah.
And you can set up refining and distribution networks that generate money. And that was part of that full immersion experience was that, I mean, you could literally start your own business in the game using raw resources. And the fact that they're adding that to this game, it's like you said, I mean, now there's a reason to go to the Mun.
Yeah.
Now there's a reason to go to an asteroid, you know, and also, all of our missions are based on, you know, even when I went to the, you know, to the furthest out planet I possibly could, I mean, it was all based on, I have to load up enough resources at home for the entire trip.
Yeah.
Now I can actually plan missions based on, you know, I need to get this far so I can gather resources, and then I can go even further. Mm-hmm. And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to constantly send fuel tankers out there to fuel things up and then just like deorbit them, you know, on random planets, you know. Do
you ever, when they announce new features and things, do you sometimes feel overwhelmed?
Because like, I got to use it all.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, he was showing like, when he was showing the picture of the new heat shields, the way that, I mean, he had this convoluted thing that was all
pile of girders,
this giant, you know, contraption. And I was sitting there looking at that going, oh my God, I'll never figure that out.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I'm sure a month after it comes out, I'll be, oh, of course, it's real easy.
Yeah. It's like when you see each part together, otherwise it looks like some like, like convoluted mess of pipes.
Yeah. I have to say they, every little nugget that they toss out there, telling us about 1.0 is making me just that much more excited. I'm really getting anxious for this because what I'm seeing, I'm really liking. And when we first started talking about 1.0 way back when, I was not as excited about it as I am now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the more they show me and the more that I see, the more I'm thinking, come on, baby.
Yeah.
Daddy needs some 1.0.
I mean, take a physics bubble bath.
Yeah. That's that. I would, if anyone has any information on that, if you can clarify, I'm wondering if it's a multiplayer thing or if it's just a game thing.
Yeah, an in general thing.
So, we have talked about multiplayer, because, you know, we're not quite sure, how that's going to work in the game.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, and North Star talks about this in a little bit. I'm just wondering if basically everybody's going to have their own little sphere that they're in control of.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, I mean, I guess we may have occasional moments where you see somebody else just move incredibly fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only way I could make it is either everyone votes to time warp a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But then you have like one guy who needs a time warp 8 days, and one guy who needs a time warp 4, and so he, you know, Mr. 8 days gets halfway there, while the guy that did 4 days is where he wants to be, and is going to be doing stuff for a while.
I can see that as being incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. So the other one I think of is just dropping time warp altogether and introducing time warp drives, where each one is like, oh, I can, you know, move at hyperspeed, you know, to where I need to go.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm just, you know, in my head, I'm just thinking that goes back to the physics bubble. I'm just thinking that everybody's going to have control of their own little space. Mm-hmm. And then because it's all against a moving background, the game is going to try and balance it to where everybody's, even though they're moving at different speeds, they're all still kind of at the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm just not quite sure how that's going to work.
Yeah.
I'm
interested to see it.
I want to get into progress, and there's a nice segue here. We were talking about actually being able to go to the Mun for a reason. Well, I already have a reason to go to the Mun. Do you remember in our last episode, I had mentioned that Freetoss had taken me on a guided tour of various Easter eggs in the game?
Yeah.
And I had asked him, how did you know where all this stuff was? Because when I did my brief little attempt at Easter egg hunting, it was very frustrating because it was a lot of looking and a lot of not finding. And he said, well, I use ScanSat, and it identifies everything as anomalies, and then I just went and visited all the anomalies. Well, the last time we spoke, I was messing around with Remote Tech, which is the mod that requires you to set up communications networks. And I got real good at building satellites and deploying networks and the whole bit. Once I got that part taken care of, I discovered that I really didn't care anymore about remote tech. The fun part to me was building and deploying satellite networks. Yeah. But once it was in place, then it was just like, well, so what? I mean, now that it's working, I'm not experiencing really any difference in gameplay if I didn't have remote tech installed. And so I was kind of looking for something to do. And I said, well, since I don't really, since I'm not really revved about remote tech anymore, I'm going to take that out and I'm going to install ScanSat.
Yeah.
ScanSat is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
When I first installed it, I had a crowd of players on Steam watching me. And I didn't, when I first installed ScanSat, I didn't really know what I was doing with it. Which, by the way, I should just record, I didn't really know what I was doing and just save myself some labor, just periodically just play that part.
Yeah.
Just hang on. Let me go to the pre-recorded. I really didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I put ScanSat in, and I went to the Mun, and I set up this nice little equatorial orbit, and I started scanning. And I made a couple of passes, and I subtly adjusted my orbit to kind of expand it, and I started, and I was scanning more areas. And after a little while of doing this, finally somebody goes, Biff, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm scanning the planet. And they go, get into a polar orbit.
Yeah. So it goes like up and down instead of doing the zigzag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, and of course I'm thinking, why? And so I do a polar orbit and I go, okay, now what? And they said,
wait.
Well, they said, time X and wait. And that's when it's like, boom, I got it. It's like, oh, you go up and down and the planet turns under you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to adjust your orbit at all.
Which even if the planets were all, because they're all on the same, the perpendicular, how we're talking about North Star brought that up like a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
You could still do that really because it's just a polar orbit. But yeah, you can get an entire scan of the globe.
Well, it's another one of those things that once I figured out what they were telling me to do,
you're like, oh yeah.
It was like, oh, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
But my first thought when I put ScanSat in was that I was going to have to physically make rings around the globe.
Yeah, you do it and then tweak it a little bit and get another thing and then tweak it a little bit. Yeah.
I thought that was so funny. It was just, Biff, what exactly are you doing? I'm scanning. It's like, okay, for the slow people, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
But since then, I have done complete scans of Kerbin, the Mun, Minmus, and I'm proud of myself for this one. I sent a unmanned probe to Duna, and I did a complete scan of Duna. Well, I realized that I had just enough fuel to get the same probe over to Ike and set up a polar orbit.
Well, that's cool.
And I mean, when I say enough fuel, I mean, by the time I got into a polar orbit and started scanning Ike, I was down to just the RCS that was left in my tanks.
Wow.
That's how tight it was. But I did manage to actually use the same probe on Duna and Ike.
Yeah.
And it was one of those situations where that was not what I intended. Mm-hmm. But
you're like, hey, let's go for it.
When I completed Duna, because at that point I was thinking, well, I need to send another probe for Ike, and that's when I realized I've got just enough fuel because I created a maneuver node, and thanks to Kerbal Engineer, I could look and see how much delta V I had, and I could look at that, and I could look at the maneuver node, and I was like, I'm like within, I think it was like 20 or 30 meters per second. I had just enough to get from Duna to Ike and close my orbit around Ike.
Yeah.
And then I ditched the bigger engine that I had and did the rest of it with RCS. And by the time I got done, I had very little RCS left. Mm-hmm. So I managed to do it with what little resources I had.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to what I was saying. Once I did a complete scan of the Mun, I identified all the anomalies on the map, Now I have a reason to go to the Mun, and I actually have an objective, which is I'm trying to visit the anomalies. Well, the first one that I went to was the Neil Armstrong Memorial, which, knowing where it is thanks to ScanSat, simplifies it, but not 100%, because the ScanSat map does not overlay the in-game map.
Yeah, so you had to check it, then check the overlay.
Yeah, what I had to do was I'd look at the ScanSat map, and then I would go to the in-game map, and I would have to kind of estimate. And so where I landed first on the Mun was downrange of where the Neil Armstrong Memorial was. So, and this is very difficult to do. If you land and then go back into orbit and rendezvous and dock and the whole bit, that's a lot easier than landing and then taking back off and landing again.
Yeah.
There's a lot more can go wrong with that, or at least in my experience. So what I did was I landed downrange of the Neil Armstrong Memorial. I lifted off, and I got close to where it was, and I basically hovered and hung real low to the ground, and I managed to spot it from what am I trying to say? Why am I going blank?
Like on the horizon, or?
Well, I from a higher altitude, or from a low altitude hover, I finally managed to see it. And the way you can see it is, it's the only object that has square edges. It's the only square down there. And so that's how I was able to, once I spotted it, then I was able to land. And I got close enough to where I could walk to it. It was still a little bit of a hike, but I did manage to get to it and actually look at it.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. It was really cool to be able to go see that. I did a lot of maneuvering around to try and get the best picture. But you know, that's what I'm doing now, is I'm trying to hunt anomalies on the Mun. The experience with the Neil Armstrong Memorial taught me that trying to do it from an aerial point of view is difficult.
Yeah.
So, and you should love this, what I did instead was I created a lander buggy.
There you go.
Yeah, I built it's a lander with wheels. Okay, and it is, it's kind of spread out, because on the Mun, you really need a low center of gravity. And if you get going too fast, it's real easy to hit a bump and suddenly you're airborne.
Yeah.
Or Mun-borne. So I actually built something that it lands literally on its wheels, and you can drive around. And then when you're done, you can take off, fly the thing up into orbit, and rendezvous and dock with your mothership. So I've got
a flying car.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I've got a flying car, and I'm trying to, there's an anomaly that I'm trying to get to. Distances on the Mun are very deceptive. What looks like, when on the ScanSat map, what looks like you're real close to an anomaly, it's actually a lot further away than you realize.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot longer to get there than you realize. And also, since I've never really done a lot of traversing on the Mun, all of a sudden, trying to drive up the side of a mountain and come back down the other side is now an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever I had my my rollie on the Mun, and I was going, it was like, you had to get momentum going, and then you had to stop when you got to the other side.
Well, the thing about the Mun is with the mountains is, if you get too much of a slope, it's not much. It doesn't take much for this thing to do a backflip, and next thing you know, you're spinning out of control with abs. And I mean, when I say out of control, I mean literally no control, because you are hovering in the air, toppling end over end.
Yeah.
I mean, you have no control. And so, you know, going up the side of a mountain is difficult, and then coming down is difficult, because then all of a sudden you're building up massive amounts of speed. And, you know, speed kills, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Because all you have to do is hit a little depression, and all of a sudden, zoom, you're flying. But I've messed around a little bit. I can make it act as a hover. I'm not real good at it yet, but that's where the episode where I was talking about, you know, Mud-doggin
Yeah.
Mud-doggin on the Mun. Did you ever mud-dog when you were younger?
I'm not sure.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
It's where you take your car to like a big mud, and you do like donuts and spin and.
Oh,
you never did that?
No, not really.
You weren't like a great unwashed teen.
That was that took place outside.
Oh.
So yeah, I wasn't big on it.
Do you know? Boy, this is going to be an aside. Do you know what we did as kids? I say kids. I mean, to me, of course, I was a kid then.
Yeah.
Now I look at it and go kid, but at the time I was, by God, I was an adult, even though I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. We had the house that I grew up in. They built this huge flood channel behind our house, and what it was imagine a gigantic concrete,
like ditch.
Yeah, it was but I mean, it had a completely flat bottom, mm-hmm. and it had ramps that you can drive down into it.
Yeah.
And it was meant to, when it rained heavily, that thing would fill up almost to the brim. But it was meant to keep that whole area from flooding. Well, most of the time, most of it was dry. Mm-hmm. But there was a couple of stretches where there was, if you stood, the water would maybe come up to the top of your feet.
Yeah.
Just very thin little bit of water. Mm-hmm. I'm not kidding. Me and some friends would drive a car down there, and we would tie a ski rope to the bumper, and we would ski.
Wow. Yeah,
well, it was real funny, right, until all it took was a rock.
Yeah.
You hit a rock, and boom, you were flying.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that would stop you real quick. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I'm amazed Darwin's Law didn't take me out.
Yeah.
Natural selection didn't take me out. Because for some reason, I looked at a giant drainage ditch and went, I'm going to go skiing.
Yeah. It's...
But anyway, so I'm mud-dogging on the Mun. If I can find a giant trench, I'll try and see if I can't ski. I don't know. What have you been up to in our? Is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks? I guess 2 weeks.
I don't remember.
Okay.
So I've been
It's been so long.
Well, last weekend I couldn't play at all because It's like I got home from being on the road and then I had to go back on the road to go, to her hometown to do all of her birthday stuff. And then once that was over, I drove back home to pack and then go back on the road again. So,
yeah, but the important that you got some major boyfriend points.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah.
So you can redeem those anytime. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll deposit them. Maybe I'll get some interest.
Right.
So, you go buy low, sell high on the boyfriend point stock. So I
could make so much out of that, but I'm not going to say a word.
So, I played this week and I got some, just some contract stuff. And I was like, okay, this whole Mun thing's kind of played out. So I started building a probe and I was like, I'm going to Minmus. I'm going to send a probe and I'm going to start orbiting Minmus. And, I was going to probe first, ask questions later, like have that thing flying around and get any little science contracts I could.
Right.
And also started the Minmus contract that, lets me get whatever, So I start building this thing and I launch it and I fly around and my orbits are complete garbage, and I'm balancing my fuel. I remembered forever ago you said one of the easiest ways to get to Minmus is look where the orbit intersects, and so I was like, okay, I need to work on that.
Right.
So I would get it to where I had a really long oval orbit, going 100 meters above Kerbin to, extending beyond Minmus orbit.
Yeah. That's where being able to move your maneuver node around really helps.
Yeah. So I was flying, I just kept zipping past it. And that's what I used to do with the Mun, is I'd build to where I had an orbit going around Kerbin that would pass the Mun's orbit. And I would just time warp until I got caught.
Right.
It was just the easy way because it's eventually going to happen. I just had to time warp till I get caught, Well, the problem with this one is I couldn't do that because it also passed through the Mun's orbit. So if I did it too many times, I was going to get caught in the Mun's orbit way before Minmus.
Have you ever had that where you're the best laid maneuver node suddenly gets waylaid by an encounter?
Yeah.
With
You're
like the one, I'm trying to go to Minmus, and all of a sudden I've got an encounter with the Mun, and it throws me completely out of the system.
The Mun's like, hey, come over. I got some new craters, and you're like, no, man, I was gonna go over and see how Minmus is doing. Like, no, why are you hanging out with him? Why don't you come over and hang out with me?
The Mun is that clingy friend that you can't get rid of.
Yeah, he's so close, and
I've got snacks.
Yeah, he's like your neighbor. He just won't leave you alone. Right? No. I just want to meet some new moons. That's it.
I miss you.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I gotta extend this orbit, and I gotta get away from the Mun. Clingy. So I hop on there,
the clingy Mun,
and I extend the orbit, and I realize I'm going the opposite direction. Like it's going counterclockwise. I'm going clockwise.
Yeah.
And so I said, you know what? That just means it'll happen faster.
Yeah.
So. But that also gives me like very, I didn't have to rendezvous with it. I'm going to run into it. Mm-hmm. So, I extend this thing, and I eventually get an encounter, and it's a very small window. And this was the first time I'd actually used multiple maneuver nodes.
Right.
I'd stacked them instead of just doing one and then building the next one because they're so far apart. I didn't have a great window to do this, so I stacked my maneuver nodes, and some of them were just, really small. Like I only had to move a couple meters, so I was going into docking mode and using the RCS just to propel me a little bit forward and getting out of that.
Question.
Yeah.
My experience has been the further out you make your changes, it seems to use less fuel. Has that been your experience?
What do you mean changes?
Well, like for example, you do one maneuver node that gets you on the way to Minmus, and then you want to shift once you're actually outside of Kerbin's sphere of influence and you're on your way to Minmus, if you want to shift your encounter, you can make little adjustments. You can create another maneuver node and make little adjustments. If you make the maneuver node closer to... The closer to Minmus you make the maneuver node, it seems to require more fuel. That's been my experience.
See, what I've done, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question here, but what I've done is whenever I've had the encounter, like I would be passing by and it would give me just a slight blue line of whenever I was in the influence to whenever I'd leave it, Kerbin, encounter Minmus encounter, Minmus escape.
Right.
I just went to wherever the periapsis was, and I would build a maneuver node to close my orbit there.
Okay. No, I'm talking about let's use Joule as an example. Let's really expand this thing out.
Yeah.
Let's say that when I leave the Kerbin system and I am now in solar orbit, okay? If I make a maneuver node close to Kerbin, the Kerbin system, to adjust my approach to Joule, it seems to take less fuel than if I made a maneuver node close to Joule to change my approach.
Oh.
You see, the further out I make the maneuver node.
Yeah.
That's been my experience.
I'm not sure. Okay. I haven't done anything going from say solar orbit to I haven't done an interplanetary transfer or anything like that.
But my experience has been for example, leaving Kerbin. If you do the maneuver closer to Kerbin than to Minmus, it seems to use less fuel.
I don't know. I usually put all of my orbits or all my maneuver nodes at apoapsis and periapsis and adjust from there.
You do realize somebody is right now screaming at their radio.
Yeah.
No, you idiots.
So I'm just gonna say I don't know. Okay. I pull maneuver nodes until they run into things and just work with that.
Yeah. Okay.
So
my apologies, I interrupted. Please continue.
So there was the periapsis. I got that and made that second maneuver node to close the orbit, and I closed the orbit and brought it in and was able to send my science, and I now have my very first anything going around Minmus.
Yay!
Yeah.
What did you think the first time you saw Minmus?
That was what I tried to do. Is I didn't look at it. Mm-hmm. I was had it to my back pretty much from the camera view until I got really close. Because I was I don't want to see it at all until I'm really close.
Avert my eyes.
So then I flip around and
you're like a Victorian gentleman, like you don't want to look at the female form.
Yeah. My girlfriend was
at
walking
least until
by.
You're married to it.
Yeah. My girlfriend was walking by, and she's like, "It looks like a piece of cereal."
Yeah,
and I was like, "Yeah, it kind of looks like those wasabi peas."
Yeah,
it looks like one of those except blue.
See, I think it looks like sherbet.
Yeah, no, I
think it looks like lime sherbet.
Yeah, And so it's like now I'm floating around Minmus. So I have that probe, and I have way more fuel than I thought. Like, I have quite a good chunk of fuel. I don't think I'm going to do anything with it. I'm just going to leave it be, you know, and that guy's just going to get me science from Minmus, you know, contracts.
Do you have a lander?
No, not on that probe.
Not on this one. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't really. I mean, I guess I could send a probe to the surface and transmit science from there from a temperature reading. Right. But I don't know. I kind of want to get the flag knocked out of the way too, and send a Kerbal knot there. Right. So. You know, it's like if I'm in for a penny, I'm in for a pound.
Well, I'm proud of you. Your first Minmus encounter.
Yeah, it was. I remember last time I tried to do it, and I set the entire thing up, and then I realized there was a Z-axis, and I was like, oh, you know, because I set it up like the same. You know, I was basically on the same plane as a Mun orbit, just really, really far out for no reason. Yeah, you know, and I look at Minmus, and I was like, oh, that's nowhere close. Yeah. So. But well, yeah, it was pretty cool.
What makes Minmus so tricky is, unlike the Mun, which you can see from great distances, Minmus is, you know, until you get close, that's where the whole pea analogy really works. Yeah, because it is so small.
Yeah, and like whenever I was flying through, I was pretty close, but I would have caught a Mun encounter almost immediately at the distance I was. But with Minmus, I was getting really tiny encounters really far out from it. Right. So, yeah, it was like I could just tell. It's like, man, this thing does not have as much pull.
Well, do you remember I was talking about ScanSat? ScanSat has different types of instruments, and the instruments work at different altitudes. They all have a range, but there's a couple of them where they give you a specific altitude where they say it works best at this altitude. One of them works best at 750 kilometers. The other one works best at 250 kilometers. Well, there's one instrument in ScanSat. The maximum range to target that this one instrument has is 2 kilometers, which is still, from an orbital point of view,
it's still pretty crazy.
Anything less than, say, 15 kilometers, you are in serious danger of slamming into a mountain. Yeah. And the reason, I'm doing planetary scans or moonitary scans, and the most I can get is 80%, is because 20% of it is that one thing that only works at a maximum height of 2 kilometers. And so I tried to create a 2 kilometer orbit around Minmus. Yeah. And ended up slamming right into a mountain. But I think I ended up with, total planetary scan was like 82%. Yeah. You know, because there were just like little bits and pieces where it would be just in range enough to scan. You know, and then the ground would drop away, and all of a sudden it'd stop scanning. So anyway, well, I am so proud of you. You did Minmus. Yeah. Yay.
And now that I'm set up there, I'm looking into basically just doing that exact same thing I did, except instead of all that extra stuff, making that stuff for a lander and landing. Not sure exactly about the getting back part, but and one of the hard parts about career mode is you don't get SAS with some of the Kerbal knots until they're like trained up. Right. So I don't want to send my best to not be able to send them back. Right. But the other guys, they're just not good enough. Right. So I'm thinking about having a probe steer it and just have a Kerbal knot there. Right. You know, so because
you start building it and use a probe core as the main. Yeah. And then but have a Kerbal knot along for a ride.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, because it's like I can either train this Kerbal knot or I can just buy this probe core and then just have him, you know, have the probe core steer it.
One big plus that you're going to discover, it takes very little to escape Minmus. Yeah. I mean, it does not take much at all.
What I'm worried about is escaping. Well, actually, I guess since I would now be on its plane, getting intersected with Kerbin would be easier. So, yeah, that may not be so bad.
Yeah, it does not take much to get away from Minmus.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm going to basically use the same thing I did with the last ship. Okay. And just, put landing legs on it and get that thing to set down.
One thing that you can get different kinds of science on Minmus. I'm sure when you were orbiting, you notice that there's areas that are flat and darker. You know, I call them lava flows, even though they're probably not.
Yeah.
But there are areas that are flat and darker, and they're surrounded by areas that are light and fluffier. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can get different kinds of science if you'll go to those areas.
Okay.
So,
and you just grab the soil samples or whatever and just store them in the pod?
Yeah. What was I told you, this was a couple back, I told you that I had walked a guy all the way down from the mountains down to one of the lava flows, the flat lava beds.
Yeah.
And gotten a sample and then ran out of RCS on the way back. And,
yeah.
And I for some reason couldn't get up my lander. And so I kept running, like I would go back a distance and run a ways and jump. Mm-hmm. And, and it took me forever to get it to where I could, land on top of the lander.
Yeah.
Just to get back in. Well, that was Minmus.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I landed at a very high altitude and then walked all the way down and then tried to come back. And
yeah.
That's when I discovered I had blown most of my RCS on the way down. Oops.
Oh, well. But yeah, that's my progress.
Okay, well, very good. Well, let's go ahead and move along.
And now your letters and the latest news in the mission briefing.
Well, we're going to start out with let's just say not a fan. This is a letter from Alex A. And it says, "Hi, Nos and Biff. I really enjoy about 30 minutes of your podcast.
Me too.
The rest of it is terrible.
Ooh.
If you must constantly go off topic, it has to be good. Spending the first 25 minutes playing a card game is not funny." You notice he didn't mention the board game.
Yeah.
The board game was hilarious.
Yeah, it was the card game.
It
sorry,
was
guys.
hysterical.
Yeah.
It is just a waste of your listeners' time. Please have a bit more respect for our ears and the clock. Please try to cut out the bloat. Is he calling me fat? If you could cut it down to an hour at the very most, it would be much easier to listen to. You need some kind of time limit to focus your efforts, much the same way as you can't become a good KSP player without being limited by funds and part counts early on, like playing career mode. Biff. That was directed at me.
Yeah.
I hope you're able to do this because I haven't made it to the end of the last 25 episodes, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Regards, Alex A. I was being a little joking when I was reading that, but I do want to say we take all criticism seriously.
Yeah, those are legitimate critiques and concerns from Alex.
And we take every listener seriously. I mean, we appreciate every listener we've got. And we try to listen to the criticism and we try to respond to it. The whole reason that But I Digress became After the Credits was because we had listeners writing in going, I really don't feel like slogging through something I'm not interested in to get to the end of the podcast. Mm-hmm. And so what we did, based on listener feedback, we took But I Digress, we moved it to After the Credits, and we only do it when we have something to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everything else is strictly Kerbal. Mostly Kerbal.
Yeah.
Occasionally, I get off on my skiing through the flood ditch.
Yeah, so like every now and then we'll have a tangent or a digression, but we usually try to bring it back.
And usually the digressions, they are to illustrate a larger point about Kerbal. I had mentioned, do you remember I had mentioned when we were talking about multiplayer and the different instances, do you remember I talked about the Star Trek holodeck, the next generation holodeck?
Yeah.
And how everybody there was an instanced player. Mm-hmm. That was to discuss Kerbal multiplayer.
Yeah,
even though it was a digression, it was meant to illustrate a larger point. Mm-hmm. The one thing I will say, Alex, though, if you have not been able to make it to the end of the last 25 episodes, and you wrote this one right after we aired episode 44, we got this letter before episode 45, which was the one that focused on a Kerbal Live.
Yeah.
I will say, and I promise I'm not being snarky, but if you haven't enjoyed the last 25 out of the last 44 episodes, I'm going to say you're probably just not a fan.
Yeah. And
overall.
And it's We appreciate you listening.
Yeah.
And we're not saying, well, if you don't like it, you should just go away. But this kind of format that we have right now is probably the format we're going to have for a while.
Yeah.
You know, the way that we do it is we're not Kerbal News.
Yeah.
We're not strictly Kerbal News. Like somebody could make, and we're by no means like have the monopoly on being a Kerbal podcast.
Right,
like somebody else could move in, and we're not going to be like talking bad about
talking
it.
smack.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to make Kerbal News and do a 30-minute podcast of just strictly Kerbal News, nothing else, you know, straight up reporting, they could. And, you know, power to them. There's a Twitter for that too. There's Kerbal News, you know, like they just talk about Kerbal News.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, someone could do that. We are trying to give a little bit of everything because right now there's no one giving anything as far as podcasting goes, just strictly for Kerbal. There are Kerbal episodes of certain podcasts, but we're the only ones doing this right now.
Right.
And we're kind of doing it the way we want to because we want to make it enjoyable for ourselves because it motivates us to continue doing it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is after, you know, here we are on episode 46. I mean, we have kind of fallen into a pattern, and these are our personalities. And, you know, this podcast is, I won't say it is what it is, but I mean, we have pretty much fallen into what the podcast is.
Yeah.
And seriously, if you have not enjoyed 25 out of 44, I don't know that, you know, after the credits was something we could fix.
Yeah, I don't
know this is something we can fix.
Yeah, I don't think we can change enough to make it something that you would want.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sorry that we don't have exactly how you want it, and I wish we could. I wish we could please everybody.
Yeah.
But we also have to do something that is something we want to do. Because if it was, you know, strictly on topic and, you know, we don't joke around or have any fun, you know, and just get, I don't know, silly sometimes, we wouldn't be near as motivated to show up every week and do it.
Yeah.
You know, because
I would be bored with that.
Yeah. You know, so it has to be something we want to do. You know, it would be like if we started Twitch streaming a game we hated, you know, but everybody still wants us to play it or something.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, now I'm going to jump on another Koopa because you guys want me to. Oh, boy, this is so much fun. You know?
But seriously, thank you so much for writing in.
Yeah, and we do appreciate the letter and your concerns.
You know, as much as I love it when people write in and go, hey, great program, you know, I like to hear from people that say, you know, here's something I think you could do better.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way we're going to get better.
Yeah, we appreciate all praise and criticism equally.
The other thing that I will say, he made the comment about me being a better KSP player if I would do career mode. This is something that has come up many times.
Yeah.
North Star brings this up every time he watches me play Steam. I know this is heresy to some people because, I mean, I know gamers that if they cannot set the game on the most excruciatingly difficult level possible, if the game is not sending people to their houses to try to kill them in real life, they're not having fun.
Yeah.
North Star likes to play a very technical, very challenging game. Amy K. I mean, we've even coined the phrase kettlewell mode. Amy K loves to play the game the most difficult way she can. And you know what? More power to them.
Yeah.
That's the way they enjoy playing the game, and I think that's great. I enjoy playing the game. The whole reason I play Sandbox is because I want to build and fly.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to do. I am getting better, and as I try to accomplish more, I have to get better to accomplish the things that I want to. But the fact is that Kerbal to me is a gigantic sandbox. It's a big playpen. And I want to take all the toys and I want to play with them the way I want to play with them. And I'm not really interested in building the most efficient rocket. I'm interested in building the rocket that does what I want it to do.
Yeah, that'll get you there.
Right.
Maybe not the best way, but it'll get you there.
And if I can't get there with what I've got and I need to become more efficient to do what I want to do, then I will.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a game.
Yeah.
I'm playing the game to have fun. So that's why I don't play career mode.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not dissing North Star and I'm not dissing Amy K. I think it's great that they play the game they want to play it. I'm playing the game. I want to play it.
Yeah, I run into this a lot playing like strategy games and stuff. Like usually there is a current like alpha strategy, you know, like the one that just works flawlessly, and I'll get completely bashed, you know, for like, oh no, I don't do that. Like, why? It's the best one. It's like the game's not interesting to me if I'm doing it that way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just not. You know, I want to do what's interesting to me and play it that way. And there will always be people who want to play it in the best way possible, the most efficient way possible,
right?
Because that's how they want to do it. And there's some people that want to see if they can slap everything together and fly blind, and that's kind of what I've done now and then. So I'm pretty sure if anyone watched me and the people who have, they would find it infuriating. Yeah. You know, the way that I play, because I just want to see if I can get there, and I don't want to overburden myself with a whole bunch of calculations and all that. I think I can do it this way, and using some intuition, I think I can get it to work. You know,
I have jokingly said that my mission in life is to give North Star a heart attack.
Yeah,
and I think I think it was Freetoss, but somebody said, "Well, you've succeeded," because every time Freetoss logs in to watch me play on Steam, I mean, it's like within 2 seconds, it's like, "Oh, hey Biff, how are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing that?"
Yeah.
And I finally said to him at one point, I went, "Oh, calm down. It's a game. Haven't you ever just farted around?" Because, I mean, he was going, "Why are you putting that piece there?" And I'm going, "Because I'm farting around, because I'm having fun."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when North Star plays, I don't know if you've ever watched him or not, he's got so many data screens open. Like when he's doing vehicle assembly, he's got so many data screens open, you can almost not see the ship.
Yeah.
And he's, there's all these little numbers and all these little things that he's tweaking. And I mean, he's having fun. And I love to watch him do that.
Yeah.
But that's not the only way to play the game.
Yeah, it's something that we can run into. Like, both of us are now personalities in the community, which is, God help the community.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's weird. It's honestly really weird. Like, whenever, in the last episode when Amy was talking about contacting us and stuff, it was weird that we're like people that would be contacted. And we're just,
Yeah.
I mean, as far as we know, we're just two guys who just sit here and talk, and we got, some listeners here and there, and one in American Samoa.
Well, remember, the technical term is farting around.
Yeah, so we're just farting around here. So, we're just doing that, and people will see us as, like, members of the, big members of the community.
Right.
And it's weird because we're just here playing a game,
yeah,
and we're playing it the way we want to. And this is by no means us saying, well, don't try to correct me. I want to be, to be wrong. Yeah. I meant to do that. I meant to do that.
Yeah, I meant to do that.
You can, just don't expect us to always follow through.
Yeah. Well, there's, I think it's, I'm blaming everything on Freetoss. Well, I guess I should, because he blames everything on me. No, seriously, I mean, he's always teasing me about, you always build these huge ships, Biff. It's like, yeah, because that's what I want to do. I mean,
yeah. And I mean, if you wanted to build smaller, more efficient ships, you'd look into it.
I would do that.
I would hope you would.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just like torturing yourself.
Well, I mean, you've been here through the grand tour I made, where I went to everything you could go to.
Yeah.
In the game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as I got further out and I went to more and more difficult places, I had to adjust my building and piloting style. Mm-hmm. Because there were places that, just because you can get to the Mun and back doesn't mean you can get to other places.
Yeah.
And again, so, I'm a much better player now than I was a long time ago. Some of that has to do with what I've tried to do. A lot of it has to do with a lot of help from the Kerbal community.
Oh, yeah.
But you've heard me say this before. There is that point where it's not fun anymore. And,
and that point is different for everybody.
Yeah.
It's the point where you've mastered it, or the point to where you're doing more technical work than practical play,
If I ever played like North Star plays, for example, it would not be fun.
Yeah.
For me.
For you. For him, it is.
For him, it is. And I think it's great.
And that's kind of how it is with games in general, but simulation games specifically.
Yeah.
You kind of do it however you want.
Right.
And I mean, if if you gave the game to, like an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, they're going to think crashing the ships is fun.
Yeah.
And any of us would be screaming.
Yeah.
Like,
why are you doing that?
Yeah. So everybody's kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
But back to the letter, because we don't want to keep digressing. We do appreciate any criticism that we get. And we want you to know that we by no means want to like start targeting you for like any time we're like, oh, well, we're going too far. And, Alex is going to be angry. So we do appreciate your letter. Yeah. And if this is something that you're just not liking the way it's constructed, you can skim through if you want. It's a lot of people have said it's harder to skim through on their phones or their whatever. So you can watch it on YouTube and, skip around through there.
I would like to point out, however, that he did make a big difference as far as this episode goes, because we did just kind of as a one-off joke, we did the board game.
Yeah.
And then I challenged you, and you came back with a card game.
Yeah.
Well, I was considering today that since we were breaking all the audio podcasting rules by doing board games and card games, I was thinking that today I would open the show with either shadow puppets or miming. But I got that letter, and I thought, as a nod to Alex and to recognize the criticism, I won't do the shadow.
If we opened with one of those every time, it would be so awful.
Oh God,
it was a 2-shot thing. It was kind of fun, kind of silly, but I don't think we're going to be doing that anytime soon. Like,
you know what really tickled me? You, as far as I'm concerned, you had the quote from episode 44. I mean, you had the quote of the episode, which was, do you remember we were playing the card game, and you remember we bombed every segment except for the mission briefing, the letter segment, and I made the joke that the segment that we had the least to do with and the audience had the most to do with was the only one that was successful. And that's when you said the quote, which was, you said, yeah, because they're willing to put up with stuff like this.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, that was the quote of the episode. It's like our long-suffering audience. They're able to tolerate these, it's like, hey, it's an audio podcast, so we're going to do, miming, Hey, look, here's me walking against a strong wind.
Yeah. It's like, all right, we're going to doodle now.
Yeah. Hey, look at this drawing.
Oh, that looks neat.
Yeah. Anyway, hopefully we have, I won't say we've addressed your concerns, Alex, but obviously we took it to heart.
Yeah.
As much as we can.
We want you to know that we did read the letter and we did consider your points.
That's right.
So.
Well, let's move on. We have another letter, and Nas is going to read this one.
This is from Dan H. Hey, guys. You're speculating on how multiplayer would work. In the Dark multiplayer mod for KSP, it has a couple different ways to operate, one being a master controller. Another being a voting type system. But the default and best way, in my opinion, is it creates a separate subspace for each player as they time accelerate. Thus, players can be in different times in the game. This works really well. All you have to do is click the sync button next to other player's name, and it essentially fast forwards you until your times resync back up. You can really only sync forward in time, though, not backwards, and the only way to travel backwards in time would be either loading a quick save or reverting a flight. I think a system like this would work great in stock KSP.
That's a good letter.
Yeah.
That's a very good letter.
I think that makes sense. You could warp ahead your 4 days, and I could warp ahead my 8, and then you'd be like, hey, you want to meet on somewhere, and be like, okay, well, just warp ahead 4 days, and we're there.
That's kind of what I was talking. Remember earlier I said with multiplayer, you may have it to where just another player, as far as you're concerned, all of a sudden just moves really quickly.
Yeah,
and that's the game syncing them to you. Mm-hmm. If this was a game where the background wasn't moving, multiplayer would not be that big of an issue.
Yeah, it would have been like, boom, there's another player done.
Yeah. The problem is you're talking about a game where you've got planets. You have all these objects that are constantly in motion. Mm-hmm. And so if one person speeds up and everybody else doesn't.
Yeah. So it's like, it almost makes, we're getting sci-fi on this.
I know.
It almost makes like whenever, let's say we're both fast forwarding you 4 and me 8 days. we would both go 4 days into the future.
Yeah.
And there you would be. And then I would go into an alternate dimension 4 days in the future.
Yeah.
To where the planets would have moved an extra 4 days. And then when you want to catch up to me, you load into my dimension or whatever, and we're there again.
What blows my mind is that depending on how you use the time acceleration in multiplayer, there's going to be instances where you appear to move faster to other people. There's going to be instances where other people appear to move faster to you.
Yeah.
And how the game is going to keep all of that straight.
Across an internet connection, no less.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously.
So, good luck, squad.
Yeah.
We're really counting on you.
Well, I go back to the more I see of 1.0, the more excited I get about it.
Yeah, and impressed.
If anybody can pull this off, it's Squad.
Yeah.
And I mean that in full praise mode. They have, I don't always agree with what they do, but generally, long term, they are right on the money. Mm-hmm. And again, if anyone can pull off multiplayer, it's them.
Yeah.
That last letter was from Dan H. Very good letter, and thank you much. Next letter is an audio letter. And this comes to us from our good friend, Andy M.
Hi, Biff and Nos. So as I said before, I've been working with space planes. I'd managed to get one into orbit, so the next step was to try and send fuel, because I wasn't able to get enough fuel on board for a takeoff and a trip to Junior. There was a contract to build a space station, so I thought I could do this at the same time. I needed capacity for 7 Kerbals, a science lab, communications and power. I tried setting it up all in one go, but most of my rockets disassembled themselves shortly after launch, and so it was going to have to be done in 2 stages. First I had an orange fuel tank with extra RCS tanks on the side and solar panels, along with some docking ports and the command capsule. I then added more fuel tanks and engines to get it into orbit, along with some fins to control it in the atmosphere. After a few minor adjustments, the fuel tank was in orbit and on the way to rendezvous with the space plane. It was at this point, as I was in the final stage of rendezvous, that I realised I'd missed one important aspect: RCS controls. So having parked the fuel tank next to the plane, I then had to switch the plane and use its small reservoir of RCS to eventually manage to get them to dock together. The next stage was to send up the science lab. I was able to use a similar design, and this time remembered to add RCS controls. Rendezvous and docking went much smoother, surprisingly, this time. Having completed the space station contract, I fueled up my plane ready for a trip to Junior. Once fueled, Kerbal Engineering was telling me that I didn't have enough Delta V to get to Junior. So I built a new plane with more fuel capacity and more thrust. After a few attempts, I was back in orbit. During rendezvous, though, I burnt too much RCS early on, so I had to park next to the space station. At this point, Freetoss joined to watch me rather ungainly attempt to manoeuvre my space station to dock with the plane. It was a bit of a mess, but I got there in the end. Having refueled, and again, notice I didn't have as much Delta V as I was expecting, I realised that I probably was missing fuel lines going from the main body tanks to the side tanks where the nuclear engines were situated. Anyway, I had enough fuel to get going. So with plenty of advice and tips from Freetoss, I managed an efficient transfer to Junior. A couple of adjustments on the way there got me an intercept that would take me through the atmosphere for some aerobraking. Then came lots of attempts at landing. The first problem was reducing the speed adequately. Having not really succeeded, eventually it came time to call it a night. At this point I noticed I was missing my tail fin, which probably wasn't helping the stability during landing. I'm not exactly sure when it came off. I know it was still attached when docked with the space station. So the next night, I tried again, with Freetoss watching again. He must be a glutton for punishment. First I obtained an orbit so I could go for a slower descent, and then I managed to actually do a crash landing, which the cockpit survived. But unfortunately I lost the crew compartment along with Bill and Bob, who were on board. So I tried plenty more times, and came close, but never quite managed to stick a landing. So I went on holiday for a week. This gave me a chance to come up with some new ideas. Rather than trying for a conventional landing, I went for a rocket landing. And despite being at 10 kilometres from my save point, I was able to get to the plane to turn retrograde without flipping out and fire the nuclear engines. This allowed me to stop the horizontal velocity and bring the plane down vertically nice and steady. At about 30 metres from the ground, I cut the engines and pitched forward. It took slightly longer to pitch than I thought it would, and I ended up clipping the tail on the ground. I lost the elevators on one side of my tail fin, and then bounced, and eventually I was able to come to rest on the wheels. So the crew got out, had a good look around, planted a flag, took some samples, and then got ready to leave. Unfortunately, Ferrari had managed to clip both panels of the solar panels by the side of the plane when trying to get back on board and break both of them. Fortunately, I had a redundancy system for solar panel. Wow. I had a small panel on the bottom which I'd forgotten to remove when building the plane from a previous build. So, off we went. Takeoff started off okay. I managed to get the plane into the air, but rather quickly it flipped and spun. To keep farting to try and keep the nose pointing vertically, and gradually the plane raised towards space. After going past 10 kilometers, I was able to change the pitch and get the plane into orbit. Unfortunately, this had used most of my fuel, and so a rescue was going to be needed. I built a small fuel container and launched it to Junie. Probably should have sent some more fuel, but it was probably just about enough to get me back. So off we went, back to Kerbin, plotting a course through the atmosphere. I tried numerous times to land my plane, but I had lost yaw control from the missing tail fin, and half my pitch surfaces. The SAS was doing a reasonable job, but it just wasn't enough, so I eventually decided to go for a dock with the space station. After aerobraking and eventually managing a rendezvous with the space station, I transferred the science and the crew before pushing the plane off into space. Home with T-Mobile and the M.
I think I misheard. Did he say he was... he didn't he didn't say that he was farting.
I don't know. I'm going to take that as slang now for using RCS. So.
Farting.
I really like how he's like, yeah, and then the tail fin was gone.
Yeah.
I don't know where I lost that. I'm pretty sure I had it when I left.
Don't you have to have like surgery if your tail fin falls off?
Oh yeah.
You have to have like plastic surgery to replace it. I will say I like his solution to the problem, which was, it was like, okay, this horrible thing happened and this horrible thing happened, and then I went on holiday.
Yeah.
That apparently is the solution to every problem.
Just take a week off.
I went on holiday.
Yeah.
I love his audio letters. They are so fun to listen to.
Uh-huh.
And also I love the fact that, I can just kind of kick back and listen.
If somebody could do like a 2-hour audio letter, then we can just sit back and like, hey, we got an audio letter. Click.
Hey.
All right.
Hey, somebody should send in an intro.
Yeah. So we want to give our thanks, and eventually this whole thing will run itself.
Hey, maybe we could get someone to send in a audio closing credits.
Yeah, and we'll just get the automated podcast.
Yeah, our whole job would be, and now here's this part from so and so.
Yeah,
and now here's this part from so and so. No, and send us money.
No, we'll get a guy to do that too.
Yeah,
eventually.
Hey, someone send in an audio letter to introduce the audio letters.
We'll just get this money avalanche falling.
We'll get the Mazuma train going.
All right, now on to our next letter. Hey, Biff and Nos.
Hello.
I've only become a recent listener to the cast, and it's great. It gets me through doing long runs, real-life running, and like nobody's business. And he's running for a while.
Wait a minute. Is that now? This is one of those things that happens outside, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe
I have moral objections to those.
I hope he's doing okay. I hear it's dangerous out there.
Is this Space Monkey?
Yes, this is Space Monkey.
There's a Firefly reference, by the way.
Yeah.
Was it monkeys? Was it Space Monkeys?
One thing I've found since listening is the idea of pitching over earlier in Ascent, and it's amazing. In early career, when I'm cash-strapped, I'm a heavy user of solid rocket boosters, and now with a better ascent path, my satellite launches are exiting the Kerbal sphere of influence. But onto my near miss, which is similar to one of Nas's stories on the last cast. I was doing a bare-bones mission to the Mun. I had just enough technology unlocked, but was still parts limited by my early VAB. But the mission was going down fairly well. I got to the Mun, got science from a couple of ground sites, and got back up to my command module. All going fairly well. By the return, I ran out of Delta V with the command module elliptic. Mun at the AP and about 100 kilometers on the EPA.
Apoapsis and periapsis, yeah.
So I thought I'd be clever. Jeb got out and used his EVA pack to bring himself down to a roughly circular 100-kilometer orbit, saying goodbye to the command module, but I foolishly burnt every ounce of monoprop in his pack. I then had a 2-day window to recover him before his snacks ran out. Snacks is a simplistic life support mod that hurts your rep if the snacks run out, but doesn't hurt the Kerbals. So then it was some very tricky orbital maneuvers to rendezvous with an uncontrolled Kerbal. After much effort and only a little disingenuous use of time acceleration to stop him spinning, I got the ladder directly in front of Jeb and made the recovery. Stressful times, but a good outcome in the end. Thanks for the great podcast, Space Monkey.
I have to say that the snacks mod sounds very un-Kerbal to me.
Oh, yeah? To think that they would run out?
Quote, it doesn't hurt the Kerbals.
Oh, yeah.
That is very un-Kerbal.
Well, maybe.
Think about. Okay,
maybe the snacks are like, asbestos or something. Like they eat things that hurt them. Like tax.
Asbestos joy.
Yeah.
with caramel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Deadly reentry. What's the whole point of deadly reentry? Kill Kerbals. Okay? FAR. Kill Kerbals. Life support. Kill Kerbals.
Uh-huh.
What's this nonsense about doesn't hurt the Kerbals? This is un-Kerbal.
Next, they're gonna have a mod called like Super Kerb, and you're like Superman Kerbal, and you can fly between planets.
They need to have like a Red Bull mod so that your Kerbals can, do a lot, and then all of a sudden there's that big slump. Okay, next letter. I have to say this is probably the username of the episode. Carl Kerbin.
Carl Kerbin.
Or is his email is Mr. Wrong.
The Tale of Carl Kerbin.
Call me Mr. Reagan. Oh. Call me Mr. Wrong. No, never mind. No, but Carl Kerbal.
Oh, I thought it was like a folk song.
Carl Kerbin.
The Tale of Carl Kerbal is the...
No. He's a master of a man. He walks through the valley but doesn't have a fan.
Yeah.
Or something.
That's good. Let's go.
Carl Kerbin could be a comic book name like Matt Murdock.
Oh, yeah.
Reed Richards. And it's a very alliterative name. Hi, Amy, Noss, and Biffster.
The Biffster.
I'm the Biffster.
The Biffmeister. The Bifferino.
Biffenheimer. Baron von Biffenmeister. Loved the show. Had to share a story. I had a 3-month hiatus from KSP. The technical issues with my computer were finally resolved, and I was excited to play again. So there I was with a vanilla install of KSP, and figured I would build a Mun-lander for my first sandbox mission back. Now that's what I'm talking about. Sandbox for life, yo. After countless failures, I finally was descending onto the Mun with enough fuel to get home. But that would turn out not to be enough. On the way back to Kerbin, I literally used the last drop of fuel on my retrograde burn to make an intercept course with Kerbin. Technically, it was an orbit with an apoapsis of 65,000 meters, but aero braking would save me. I ended up landing on the dark side of Kerbin. I employed my parachute at 5,000 meters, and I thought everything was going great until I landed. The pod had apparently landed in a mountain range. Oh, this is like my story.
Yeah.
Landed in a mountain range and slid down and down for a while before it eventually blew up. P.S. I love the improvements to the nav ball. Specifically, how I can have the ship point at the plotted course or retrograde. Just be careful with the throttle when you're landing on the Mun, or you might find yourself pointed the wrong way a few meters off the ground. Ha ha ha. Homer to your mobile. Regards, Carl Kerbin. You get to read the next one. The next one has a little picture that was drawn with dashes and plus and minus signs, and
I'm going to describe it.
You're going to describe it?
The first line is hey, Biff and Noss. And,
hey, we're going to do those shadow puppets after all.
Yeah. This one's from Misha. Hey, Biff and Noss and potential guests or guests. Yeah, you're back. Partway through episode 44 and loving it. Just a quick note on the procedural fairings. You don't need decouplers or separators on both sides of the PF bases. You just need one between the base and the payload to eject the payload. And he has a little picture showing the payload inside the fairing, decouplers, fairing bases, where you don't need decouplers, and so on. Just make sure you set up your staging to first eject the fairing sides and then the payload decoupler. Otherwise, the payload has nowhere to go. Guess how I found that out. Right-clicking on a fairing base allows you to set various fairing options. The size of the base, the number of sides to add, additional height, width parameters, etc. With the latest version, you can even create standard-sized, manually defined fairings instead of automatic ones.
Is that automatic or automagic?
Automagic ones. Finally, I gotcha. There's a structure and aerodynamic fairing parts included in the mod. The structural ones can't be ejected during flight. And finally, there's an additional mod tweak which turns the fairing bases into decouplers, saving you a part. Thanks for tweeting that pic of Noss's card game. I was following it mostly, but couldn't work out how you were getting negatives partway through the game. Must have missed the fact that's a card that can give penalties as well. Fares thee well, Misha.
I still say you need to make that game available for people to play.
I need to refine it because it was a mess.
Now that I know how fairings work, because you remember that was a question. How do you do fairings in KW Rocketry? And I got lots of responses telling me how to do it. I now understand part of the problem that I was running into. And Misha says that you do not need to have the two separators, the two decouplers around the procedural fairing. Here's the problem that I was running into. And it turns out this is not something, if you can do it in KW Rocketry fairings, I have not figured out how.
Yeah.
Part of the problem that I was having with fairings and part of the reason that I was not able to get it to work for me the way I wanted to initially, I was trying to build in-stage fairings. Mm-hmm. Let me explain that. In the Apollo missions, the Saturn V, the command and service module sat on top of the lunar module.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were all pointed the same direction. Okay. And the lunar module was covered with a fairing. When they started on their way to the moon, they would pop open the fairings. The command and service module would move forward a little bit, swing around, come back, connect to the lunar module, and then extract it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to have an interstage fairings so that I could have that exact same setup where the lander was situated behind the command and service module. The reason that I have to have two separators around the procedural fairings is that in that situation, if the procedural fairings base is either touching the engine of the command module or the docking port on the lander, when you blow the Separatron, the procedural fairings base stays attached either to the docking port on the lander or the engine bell on the command module. And as I said before, if it's on the engine on the command module, it actually literally limits thrust.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a separator, the procedural fairings base, and then another separator to blow it clear of both the landing hatch or the docking hatch and the engine bell. Otherwise, it's going to stick to one or the other. Otherwise, yes, he's absolutely right. You do not need to have, if you're just ejecting something and leaving it behind, then you only need one Separatron because you're leaving it behind. It doesn't matter if the procedural fairings base sticks to it or not.
Yeah.
But if you're blowing your fairings and then turning around and trying to hook to a docking port, you've got to get that fairing base off of it. And the only way to do that is to sandwich it between two Separatrons. The reason I was having trouble with KW Rocketry, the fairings in it, is from what I can tell, they're all designed to be nose cone fairings, meaning they're all supposed to be at the top. The nice thing about procedural fairings is that you can create in-stage fairings, and you can cover things that are, midway through the rocket.
Yeah.
Or further down from the point of the rocket, the top of the rocket. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to create an in-stage rocket. Or I guess, what would it be, an interstage fairing? Would that be the correct? Oh, you're giving me that look.
You expect me to know that. Oh, yeah. The guy who just got to Minmus with a probe and a prayer. Oh, yeah, what's the fairings?
God, I wish people could have seen that look you just gave me. That
ridiculous.
That was a what you talking about, Willis look. It was like, you're asking me?
Yeah.
That's the same look when people...
It's all physics bubbles to me.
Yeah, so, exactly. Well, it's like, people talk sports a lot of times. They're going, hey, what's that guy that made that big shot? I'm like,
I swear, I worked in news for a while, and there were sportscasters, and I was working on the newscast or whatever, And anytime I talked to anyone about sports, I just repeated everything they said from the previous newscast.
I did the same thing.
And they thought I knew what I was talking about. And I was like, oh, yeah, and it let them do most of the talking. But every now and then, like, oh, yeah, and so, they injured their clavicus or whatever. And they're like, oh, yeah, that ruptured spleen and stuff.
Their clavius base.
Yeah. And so it's like, oh, yeah, their fairings fell off. And I wonder if they're going to have it on before playoffs or something. And
somebody was watching some football game and somebody said, yeah, but their defense wasn't very good. And so it was like all week long I was walking around, people going, hey, did you watch the game? Yeah, their defense wasn't very good. Yeah, that's right. They'd start talking about it.
You just got to find one guy that doesn't know anyone else to tell you about sports stuff. Like, have a one-sided conversation and then just take his side and say it everywhere else.
Like a week later, they're going, all this guy says is their defense was... Boy, he really didn't like their defense.
But it was good last game, though, but he still says it's bad. He's got really high standards. He's got really high standards for the defense.
Oh, I wish they could have seen that look. That was so funny. But anyway, back to what I was saying. The whole reason I was having trouble with fairings.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I am... DK... Thank you so much for sending me in the procedural fairings direction, because that is quickly a major essential mod for me.
Yeah,
I love procedural fairings. It really, I love the fact that it custom creates fairings. You put a base either at the bottom or if you're trying to do an interstage, you have to do one above it and one below it. Otherwise, what happens is it creates a fairing that covers everything ahead of you.
Yeah.
Like literally, if I didn't put a procedural fairings base between the lunar module and the command module, it literally creates, if I put one at the base of the lander, it literally creates a fairing shell that covers the lander, the command and service module. So I have this gigantic fairing over the very top. Yeah, exactly. It almost kind of looks like a lolly, like one of those caramel coated lollipops or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to have an interstage fairing, you've got to have one. You have to have one pointing up at the bottom of the lander, and then you have to have one at the top of the lander pointing down, and that limits the length of the fairing itself. What's also nice is because the bases are adjustable, you right-click and there's a slider that allows you to change the size of it. Mm-hmm. You can create, if, for example, the rocket, the fuel tank that your lander is sitting on is wider than the command module and service module, you can create a fairing that goes from wide at the base to narrower as it gets to where it joins up with the command module, or the service module, I should say. And so you actually create an aerodynamic fairing because you can adjust the size of the bases.
Yeah.
Again, DK, thank you. You recommended procedural fairings. I love, as much as I love KW rocketry, I love procedural fairings. I don't love the fairings in KW rocketry. I love the procedural fairings. Mm-hmm. But I now know how to do fairings in KW rocketry. I just don't think they can do what I want them to do. So anyway, let's move on. Next letter, I believe you're reading it.
Are you sure? Because I thought I had you listed for that one.
Did you do the? Oh, you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
that is me.
You went on that Kerbal tangent.
Yeah, I know.
Getting off topic, talking about fairings.
Dadgummit. I told you we should have done Shadow Puppets.
Yeah.
Hey, do you see this one? It's a dog.
Oh.
Woof, woof.
It's a. Woof, woof. One of these days I'll show you what an actual dog looks like, and But that was a good guess.
Actually, we have one sleeping right over there.
Yeah.
Being very quiet, so nobody gets to take a drink. This next one comes from Jamie T, who has sent us audio letters in the past. Do you remember the last one had the birds cheeping in the background?
Uh-huh.
Jamie T, I have my own theory as to why the Kerbal community is unusually polite compared to many others on the internet. As much as we may joke about killing or otherwise abusing our Kerbals, KSP is ultimately a collection of science and engineering. There's no real enemy to compete against except possibly the laws of physics. And the game, and as Scotty told us, you cannot change the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Or I think, he said you cannot.
Yeah.
You cannot change the laws of physics. Okay. Simon Pegg is going to come here and kick my butt on behalf of James Doohan. The laws of physics are your only enemy, and the game doesn't have any message beyond space. Heck yeah. Which is something most people drawn to the game will either already agree with or come to agree with as they play. Sandra Bullock does not agree with that, though.
No.
Remember, Gravity. She says she hates space. P.S. I don't live in a Disney cartoon, but my computer is in the living room, which is where we, my family, keep our birds.
I knew he had birds.
Remember,
I grew up with birds in the house, and I was like, yeah, those are definitely birds in the house noises.
Remember I told you I thought that he had, like, cartoon birds flying around, dressing him and things?
Yeah, like help him get dressed in the morning and stuff. And like, oh, good morning. They're like, shut up, I haven't had coffee yet. And he's like, oh, okay, well, get your stuff ready. Yeah, shut up.
I
get so sick of those birds.
I will say his P.S. does not assure me.
Yeah.
If you really did live in a Disney cartoon and you had birds like dressing you and doing all the housework and things, would you really tell anybody?
No, because they'd come take your birds.
Yeah,
take your awesome birds.
I don't believe you, Jamie T. The guy, his whole house, he has like, you know what? He even has cartoon birds that show up and fix his internet problems when he has them.
Oh yeah.
He has cartoon birds that do everything, and he doesn't want anyone to know.
He knows a bird that knows a bird.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, Kerbal Online Concept.
Thank you for saving me from that digression.
Hey guys, it's Mittenpo.
Hello.
On last week's episode, various listeners shared their thoughts about how multiplayer would work for the game, and while being at work, I just came up with an idea that made me think that would actually work.
That would actually work.
You know what? Hey, get back to work.
Get back.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Hey, Mittenpo, you know your boss is one of our listeners.
Yeah. This is my $1 million idea of Kerbal Online. So the major problem with multiplayer is that you have to be in the same time space in order to interact with each other. But in Kerbal, we use time warping. We cannot look away from this because it would play on a server with hundreds of players orbiting around Kerbin. We would end up with debris everywhere and accidents all the time. It would crash not only our own computers, but the server as well, with all the physics going on. Time warping on agreement would never work out. On smaller scale, maybe it would. Basically, Kerbal Online would be an optional element of the career mode, career single mode, or career online. If we choose career online, we'll have to create and personalize our own Kerbal knot, which, I mean, I totally want to do that.
I do too.
Yeah.
I want to make a Biff Kerbal knot. Although I think that Freud would have a lot of fun with that because I would create a Biff Kerbal knot and then I would torture him. And, like Freud would be like, I think you'll have unresolved issues with your mother.
What am I doing still alive? We start the game
give me a cigar.
As we do normally. Get some contracts, make something, and launch it anywhere or anytime we want in our own Kerbal universe. So how do we interact if we're playing alone? The only place we can interact are the neutral zones where time warping is disabled inside a specific area with a radius of, say, let's just give it 3,000 meters. These zones run on a constant real-life standard time. A neutral zone must be a specific object like a station, outpost, flags, or things like a monolith, whatever. These zones will only be visible as a target like the asteroids on the orbital map and stay so unless you approach it and accept a prompt message saying, for example, enter LKO Space Harbor -1 or -1. If you don't, the target marker would just pass by as you travel away. But when you hit enter, the game system will save your current location and jump to another Kerbal universe where we share our game information with the server. So it's kind of like joining a chat room.
That's also very similar. I know I've mentioned this in the past. I played Guild Wars.
Yeah.
And when you get a party together, it creates an instanced version of that world that, nobody else, no other player in the game is in that little bubble.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's relevant. It's semi, but I understand what he's saying.
We must be able to choose where and what we're going to rendezvous with, because if all zones are visible on the orbital map, it would just be like, find Wally. Max player count for the zone might be a good idea. We don't want to crash into each other, would we? Okay, well, some people would. As said earlier, time warping is now disabled. You'll have to rendezvous in real time. It might be hard at the beginning, but as you get used to it, you'll be able to dock within a short time.
If it's a smaller space, I would think that
it'd be feasible.
Yeah, I would think time wouldn't be such a factor.
Now that you're docked, you'll be able to trade resources like fuel, minerals, soil samples, parts, duct tape, etc.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah, but you can also interact with other players without being docked in the station as long as you're inside the zone. After you're done with your stuff and it's time to leave, you can just burn away on any direction, and as you leave the zone, the system will jump you back to the last save location. Now you're back in your own universe, alone and good. But totally alone would be boring. Wouldn't it be nice if the server randomly put debris from another player's universe to yours? That'd be like treasure hunting. You never know if you'll find a useless girder or a fully loaded fuel tank. Although the initial zones would be system generated, you'll be able to create your own with restrictions of choice. And here's the good news for Squad. To be able to create your own, you'll have to pay a monthly fee. Now, don't hate me for saying this because this is also a good method of maintaining a reasonable amount of zones on a server. What do you guys think? I'll just keep on dreaming. Maybe at work. Thanks for the great podcast, Mittenpo.
Maybe at work was you added.
Yeah.
You added that part. He didn't say that.
Yeah, you gotta get through the day.
I have to say I like that idea.
Yeah.
It to me is very much MMO. The idea, like for example, let's say you and I we're both docked at the same space station, and then I go to leave and you're following me. I could invite you on. Pardon me for lack of a better expression, but I could invite you on a quest.
Yeah, yeah.
And I could like send you an invitation, and if you accept, I could see it where since I sent you the invitation, I'm essentially the dungeon master.
Yeah.
We jump into a bubble in the game that is just us.
Yeah, which is your Kerbal.
Which
game.
is it's
your Kerbal solar system.
And I'm the one in control of the time warping.
Yeah.
Or if you had sent me the invitation, you would be in control. We're spitballing here.
Yeah.
I mean, these are just possible thinking out loud.
The concept, it reminds me like that neutral zone.
Yeah.
It reminds me, there was like a series of fantasy novels. I didn't read them myself, but a friend did and was telling me about them. And there's this city that exists in every plane. So, like, in the astral plane, like, that city still exists and is exactly how it normally is.
Right.
Or in, like, the pits of hell, that city's still there and exists how it normally is. Like, once you enter that city, it's a neutral place.
Kind of like a game hub.
Yeah. And whenever you leave, you go to, wherever you came from. But you could always go to that city.
Right. Can I do since you mentioned reading sci-fi,
fine.
Can I do a plug?
All right, you get a short one.
The Martian.
Okay.
Andy Weir.
Okay.
Such a good book.
Hey, don't push it. I said you got a short one.
Okay. So the part where I said such a good book was pushing it?
Yeah. You're pushing it right now, mister.
Okay. Well, I guess technically you're right, because if I'm recommending it is kind of redundant to say it's a great book.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not going to, be like, hey, be sure and read such and so. It's a crappy book.
Yeah. I want everyone to experience what I did.
I want everyone to live with the torment. Last letter comes to us from North Star. Greetings, Kerbalcast. First of all, I was disappointed to hear no mention of my last letter. Your last letter came in after we recorded episode 44.
Yeah, so sorry, man. You missed the bus.
See, we can't, even in real life, we can't do instances of time warping.
Yeah.
Anyways, a few thoughts. First of all, Nos, I'm glad you're out of jail. I hope you haven't been doing too much gurgling.
With enough community service, they removed the gurgling from my record, so we're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
By community service, he was wearing one of those orange vests, picking up trash by the side of the highway.
No, I have to do this podcast.
Yeah.
That's my community service.
You know that car that went by really fast and chucked a Coke can at your head?
Yeah.
That was me. More seriously, though, Nos, pro tip on performing missions when you're very low on fuel and it looks like you're going to need to use RCS to complete the mission. Use RCS fuel before the remnants of your rocket fuel, or at the same time as it is as much as possible. Not after, as many players do. You will actually get more Delta V this way, as RCS thrusters, not the monopropellant engines, have much lower ISP than any rocket engine in the game. Using your lower ISP fuel first increases your Delta V, so it's wise to not wait to use RCS thrusters last if you're short on fuel. You know how you can fire them off in the prograde direction with the J key while RCS is active in normal staging mode, right? This works even at the same time your normal rocket engines are firing. You do know that, right?
I do now.
Okay.
Right.
Second, what did I tell you? Biff, Planes aren't as hard as you think. I told you, everybody that's good at planes says that.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not that hard. Yes, they are. That's why we don't like them. Sorry. I'm doing that voice. I'm doing like the petulant little whiny kid voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are. You don't know what you're talking about, man. Nobody understands me. I'm reading a letter, aren't I?
Yeah, I think you were.
I was, yes. I really do hope you'll start playing around with them a little more after following along with Freetoss's lessons. I am. Last but not least for now, Biff. Here we go. Have you ever heard of instancing? This is the most likely way that Squad will implement multiplayer, which is basically how it's done in at least one of the existing multiplayer mods. KMP or Dark Multiplayer, I can't remember which. Basically, the way this works is that each player is in their own time warp bubble, separate from all the other players, until and unless they actively sync up their time warp and game time with another player. That's a lot of what we've already talked about. So NOS might time warp forwards a week at the KSC and then launch a rocket to lunar orbit. But if you, Biff, decide to launch a Mun rocket today, you won't encounter NOS's craft in orbit unless you fast forward a week to actively sync up your time frame with his. Obviously, based on the way this works, it is only possible to interact with a craft in its most recent state. So no cause and effect paradoxes and KSP time travel Back to the Future style for you. I hope this clarifies how Squad is likely to implement multiplayer a little for you. If you don't fully understand what I meant by this explanation, feel free to shoot me a reply email or hit me up on Steam sometime, where I will be otherwise freaking out about the size of your rockets and your gameplay style and the way that you get into orbit.
You're freestyling here a bit with his letter.
No, he wrote that.
Oh, he did? Yeah, it wasn't my copy, but
yeah, not on your copy.
Yeah. There's also not as many tiers on my copy as there are on yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Regards, North Star. P.S. Biff, you really need to build smaller rockets. and I'm going to send you my medical bills because you're giving me a heart attack watching you. P.P.S. Biff, I'm really serious about this.
Okay,
build smaller rockets.
Come on. Okay.
P.P.P.S.
No,
tell NOS to let you talk.
Okay, so now it's time for the tweets.
Time for the tweets.
Let's go. At Lithobreaker. Hey, NOS, can you tell Biff that KOS is pronounced with a K and then an OS, as in chaos? Chaos.
Hey, and you know what? I'm the one that got that tweet.
At Rensloing, I can confirm that Chaos is really a lot of fun to use. MechJeb feels like cheating to me. Chaos has me a program with my own autopilot.
I think because I'm the old guy and I'm not supposed to understand technology, I think they assume you're the one on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, most of the time it's you because, like, I'm out in places where I can't get access to it.
Although you finally do have your first smartphone.
Yeah, I'm moving on up.
Up.
At Mike Doling, NOS, take my $5 Patreon pledge as the fee to not mess up the pronunciation of Patreon each month. Okay.
You know, Mike Dowling is quickly becoming my favorite tweeter. Because it's like he's the one guy that doesn't go after me about pronunciation.
Yeah. Haywood Floyd, if there's one thing Kansas and Arkansas taught me, it's the occasional lack of consistent pronunciation.
Although, Haywood, this may distress you to know, there are people that insist that it's Arkansas.
Yeah, Arkansas, not your Kansas.
Yeah,
At
right.
The Drum Guy, concerning the rolling story, the important question, how was Jeb feeling about it?
Like a sock in a dryer.
Nauseous. Freetoss. Chaos update, automated landing sequence works great on Kerbin. Nice soft touchdown, now to take it somewhere interesting. Amy K. No! It only occurs to me too late that I mimicked Biff's mispronunciation of Patreon. I, of course, blame Biff entirely.
Yes, and notice it's Biff's mispronunciation.
Yeah.
You were doing it too.
At Orbator.
Thanks, Amy.
At Orbator. So what mission
I think
was...
that's Orbiter.
Orbiter.
Well, it isn't. It is the number 8. Okay, Orbator.
So what mission was Buff and NOS on this week?
Buff. I got caught orbiting once, and it was embarrassing.
Oh.
You know, I should have put the Freetoss tweet last, because that would have been a great introduction to the Freetoss. You have to say this with me. Freetoss Flight Fundamentals.
Fundamentals.
You have to say it with me again.
I thought
better.
It was school.
No, it's Flight Fundamentals.
Oh,
Freetoss. It's FFF.
Okay.
It's like if the Fantastic Four.
It's like my grades.
It's like if the Fantastic Four were furry and they were the Fantastic Furry Four.
Oh, okay.
FFF.
That's a stretch, but let's do it.
Well, I'm thinking about the fabulous.
It's
furry
now
Freak
time
Brothers.
for Freetoss Flight Fundamentals.
Time for the tweets. No, we did the tweets. It's time for the Freetoss.
Take Freetoss.
Greetings, Kerbonauts. Freetoss here with Episode 2 of Freetoss's Flight Fundamentals. Last week, I covered the basics of how to build an airworthy jet. Hopefully, many of you succeeded and were able to take your new creations for a spin around the Space Center. If you can't seem to get off the runway, stick the landing, or turn without spinning out and ripping your wings off, then this week's episode is for you, and I'll be discussing the basics of piloting. If you weren't able to build yourself a plane, head into sandbox mode, blasphemy I know, and take the Ares 3A stock craft to practice your piloting. It's also worth noting that I used the Ferrum Aerospace Research mod to give the game's aerodynamics a realistic overhaul. It can be a little tricky to get the hang of, but should give you a preview of some of the changes in stock Squad is planning for 1.0. Taking off can sometimes be a bit trickier than you'd think in KSP. Normally, I punch the throttle to 100%, turn on SAS, and get up to speed going down the runway before gently pulling up to take off and begin my climb. There's not much else to it. You should be able to get off the ground going between 80 and 120 meters per second for most planes of this size. If you're having trouble keeping your balance on your landing gear, try spreading them out wider. Give yourself a wider base. Like I said last episode, moving your rear gear closer to your center of mass will make it easier for you to pull the nose up off the runway. Imagine that your rear wheels are the fulcrum of a lever that's trying to lift your center of mass, and that you're applying your downward force on the control surfaces of the back of your wings. The farther forward your wheels, the higher the moment your control surfaces can exert, while also reducing the moment needed to lift your center of mass. If you hit your tail on the runway, you're probably pulling up too aggressively, or you may want to move your wheels farther back, if possible. Once airborne, you're typically trying to get somewhere, such as a survey contract location. How quickly you can climb is based on your craft's thrust-to-weight ratio. I recommend making sure that as you climb, both your vertical and horizontal speeds are both increasing. Eventually, however, you'll reach the upper limit of how high your plane can fly, which is ultimately limited by the amount of air your intakes collect and the demand of your engines. In a quick experiment, I found the Ares 3A was able to reach between 13 and 14 kilometers of altitude and about 350 meters per second in horizontal flight using Ferrum Aerospace. Climbing as high as you can while keeping your engine supplied with air will increase your top speed and can get you where you're going faster. When turning your plane, it's important to keep two things in mind, especially when you're using Ferrum. First, in general, your plane has much more control and stability in pitch as opposed to yaw. If you want to turn to the right, first roll your plane, then pull up in order to turn. Simply hitting the D key while flying level to try and turn by yawing is not only inefficient, but it's also a good way to enter what's known as a flat spin, and lose control of your plane if you do this too aggressively. Second, and again more important when using Ferrum Aerospace, is to try and keep your angle of attack low. The angle of attack is the angle between your velocity vector and the direction the nose of your plane is pointing on the nav ball. Pitching or turning too aggressively, especially at high speeds, is another good way to lose control of your aircraft, stall, or even rip the wings off your plane. Make wide sweeping turns if you're flying fast, and keep both your angle of attack and plane under control. If your plane is very light and has a high thrust-to-weight ratio, you'll also want to consider throttling back to help you maneuver. As long as you can maintain lift, moving slower allows you to make tighter turns, and reduces the forces and stresses on your craft. Finally, most people like to be able to try and land their planes in one piece, maybe even back on the runway. Landing has three main phases. First, you have to identify your target. You want to land somewhere that's as flat as possible, and avoid water landings. If you can make it to the runway, great. If you can't, find as flat a piece of land as you can and aim for that. Second, as you approach your target, you want to cut your engine and slow down as much as possible, but still be moving fast enough to maintain lift. This can be tricky, and may require multiple attempts to find the perfect distance from your target to cut your engine and what glide slope to take with your specific plane. Typically, I try to come in below 100 meters per second horizontally and below 10 meters per second vertically. If you're using stock aerodynamics, you can typically fly at much slower speeds, closer to 60 or 70 meters per second. Just before you touch down, pull up and flare your nose to cut your vertical speed and land gently. Just be careful not to pull up too much and start climbing again. Lastly, once you've touched down, let your nose fall and your front wheel hit the ground. Start tapping the B key for brakes and slow yourself down. Once you're under control, hold the B key to come to a stop. Landing is tricky. Don't be afraid to quick save and keep trying. I still screw up landing more often than not. Above all, it takes practice. That's it for this week, the basics of flying. Hopefully now you can both build and pilot a simple plane around the KSC that's capable of completing some aerial survey contracts. If you have any questions, you can feel free to send me a message on Steam or tweet to me at Freetoss7. I'll talk to you again next week about supersonic and high altitude flight. Homer to your mobile.
All right, thank you again. That's Freetoss and Freetoss Flight Fundamentals. If you have any interest at all in planes or space planes, if you will follow what he says, you will build something that will get off the ground and fly.
Yeah, you'll be well on your way.
He mentioned the thing about, dragging your tail on the runway. Mm-hmm. I think that Squad, when they were designing the game, you know how the runway ends with it, it slopes sharply right at the very end of the runway?
Yeah.
I think that's on purpose. Mm-hmm. Because the plane that I built using his, flight fundamentals, I could not bring the nose up when I was barreling down the runway because it was so squat and short to the ground that if I started to bring the nose up, it would tear the back end of it off. The way I would get into orbit was I would literally go off the end of the runway. Mm-hmm. And because it drops away from you so sharply, you're suddenly airborne.
Yeah.
And that's where I would pull up. I sent him a picture of my airplane. Uh-huh. And he was like, well, it's kind of unusual, but I'm sure it works.
Yeah, it probably went off the ground once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway. One thing I give him a lot of credit for, he uses specific parts. He tells you, he names specific parts.
Yeah.
And when I was building the plane based on his teachings, it was very easy for me to go into the part lists and, okay, that's the one he mentioned. And, and I would put it on the plane and it would work. Mm-hmm. So anyway, if you have any interest at all in planes, just follow what he says.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for him to say planes aren't that hard. Because they all say it.
Yeah.
Well, we are coming to the end of episode 46, but before we go, this is a little bit of planning ahead. We talked quite a bit about Interstellar when it first came out. You remember that? Mm-hmm. It has recently been released on home video, and there are a lot of people now that had never seen it before that are now seeing it. And I would like to do a follow-up segment on Interstellar. I want to do an after the credits about Interstellar. And if we get enough and we get everything set up to where we can do it in the next episode, we'll do it then. If not, we'll do it whichever episode afterwards we have enough stuff.
Yeah.
But what I would like to ask the listenership, and I'm going to be very careful to avoid spoilers saying this, but I would like to do a spoiler-tastic follow-up on, that's the dog, by the way, so you can now take a drink. I would like to do a spoiler-tastic follow-up on Interstellar, an after the credits, spoilerific follow-up. And what I would like for the listeners to do, send us, if you would like, and send this separately, okay? Please send us regular letters, but also I would love it if you would send us a separate letter telling us what you thought of Interstellar. If you have seen it more than once, if you've seen it recently, if you saw it theatrically, did you see it in IMAX? Did you see it regular? Did you see it at home? Did that make any difference? The other thing I would like is some analysis. What did you think of the movie? What did you think of some of the meanings? Especially the ending. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I would like some theories and some speculation and some analysis about the end of the movie. And I don't mean the end, I mean the end section of the movie.
Yeah.
And I would like to do an after the credits where we talk about that. Because I don't know about you. Have you seen it more than the one time?
No, not yet.
Okay.
But I will before the next time we talk about it.
I have mentioned before, I saw the movie 3 times in IMAX, and then I saw it in standard projection. And since then, I've seen it twice at home. And going from IMAX to standard and then going from standard to home, I don't know how your setup is at home, but when I watch movies, I tend to wear headphones because I like to just blast. Yeah. I mean, I like to make my back teeth rattle.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I will pick up things in headphones that I never pick up when the sound is just ambient, when it's just floating in the air. Mm-hmm. And I have, going from IMAX to standard, because I wasn't having that massive bass being pumped at me, I was hearing lines of dialogue that I had never heard before in IMAX. Going from standard projection to home theater with headphones, I was picking up stuff that I had never picked up before. And there were, the end section of the movie, there were some thoughts and some speculation that had occurred to me that has come up on repeated viewings. Mm-hmm. And I would like to do a follow-up segment. So I would ask if you would like to send us audio or if you'd like to send us written letters. We would certainly love to hear from you. Again, it'll either be next episode or the episode after. Okay? Very good. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up episode 46. Having fun on the Mun. As always, we have some thanks that we want to toss out.
We want to thank all of our listeners and our regular contributors, everyone who sent us letters, audio letters, or tweets.
And the subreddit moderators for Kerbal Space Program and Kerbal Academy. As I've said before, there's a lot of useful links on Kerbal Academy. One that I use every time is Transfer Calculator.
Yeah.
When I'm going from Kerbin to somewhere else, Duna or whatever, I go and I use the Transfer Calculator. But there's a lot of neat links, including links to us.
Yeah.
So.
And episode music comes to us from Professor Soap. Look for him on Facebook or at profsoap.com.
And a big thank you to Askelon for posting episodes of Kerbalcast to YouTube each week so that we can take advantage, or I guess it can take advantage of us, the closed captioning.
And if you're ever feeling lonely and want to talk to somebody, you can contact us at kerbalpodcast@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at Kerbalcast.
LonelySchoolgirls.com. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes, and all episodes of Kerbalcast can be found at kerbalpodcast.libsyn.com. You can also find us sometimes
on Steam.
On Steam. I'm Biff Aldrin, and that's Nostromo sitting over there. If you would like to support Kerbalcast,
here it comes.
You know what? I'm going to let you say it.
You can donate on patreon.com/Kerbalcast.
No, I think it's Patreon.
Patreon.
Patreon. Pastrami.
Pastrami.
Pastrami.com.
Donate pastrami. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Well, maybe if they have a good site, maybe.
Okay.
But
patreon.com/Kerbalcast. If you would like to help support Kerbalcast, and if you'd like for us to pronounce that correctly, keep them donations rolling in.
We're holding it hostage.
We're holding it hostage. Okay, well, that does it for episode 46 of Kerbalcast. I am your LNP, Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin, our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Until next time,
happy Kerbaling.